A man named Jack wanders the desert. The desert sun saps the water from his skin, driving him to the nearest dark ground he can drop himself into. At his first chance, he tosses himself underneath the slices of shade from scraps of metal spiking up from the ground. It covers enough to get him out of the scorching sun, and soon enough, he cares more about the hunger pains stabbing into him. To that end, he tosses a ration bag, full of his own piss, the only source of water around, into the sun. After about an hour of letting it bake in the sun, while he does the opposite, he tears the bag open for a meal on something called butter chicken with pasta and lentils. To him, it tastes like condensed milk and ketchup leather. Not bad, all things considered. An hour or so passes and the sun dims, finally, after a 20-hour day. When the temp drops, Jack takes pace and marches towards the glimmering ruins in the distance, reflecting a flash of sunlight. Some merchants had told him there were unexamined ruins here, which to Jack is obviously a load of shit, since all ruins are raided to some degree. When he arrives at the entrance of these ruins, he finds his suspicions dead on, and the main door is cracked open with a wedge of metal. Jack hopes they missed something. The team that broke in, or the guy, couldn't have been very good, because the door is only cracked open a few inches. Jack suspects that he didn't know how to pry past the first locking gear. With his skill with runes, he fumbles a bit of metal between the doors and its frame, and slides it open just a bit more. It's tight, but Jack hauls himself through the rusted edges and into the husk of the ruins. He hopes that the first guy here was too fat to squeeze through that crack. Maybe this was a good find after all. Untouched ruins are rare, and they have their own problems, but most scabbers are more than willing to take the risk for the huge payout. How bad this is going to get. If it's totally untouched, who knows what's left roaming the halls. There's two things scabbers need to know to make it through the shitty endeavors into the ruins. First thing is that there are two common types of problems to run into. One's called wakers, and the worst one's called dormants. Wakers roam these places and cause a real problem if someone slips up. A waker is some type of robot that patrols the ruins, but usually they're pretty broken down from their constant patrols. If they spot a threat, they signal the dormants, which bring what Jack calls the real shitstorm. Most wakers still standing are in rough shape, usually more broken bits than things working. They've been running for a while, decades or maybe more. They creak, they crack, they're obvious, and most of them are out of ammo, having shot at rats or whatever other tiny details march past their threat threshold. Some of them are so broken that you can stand right beside them, and they don't even flinch at you. This can help a lot, because they have a bundle of wires draping down their back, like a cross between long hair and a spine. If you cut it real quick, they shut right down. Dormants have these too, but the wires are tight to the back and much harder to grab. And generally, Jack knows better than to try it, as it usually turns out pretty bad. But in the ruins, dormants are the real issue. Dormants are wakers that have been shut down for decades. Different things trigger them to spring up. Usually a waker or some other prox alarm will signal them awake. A dormant is bad, generally fully stocked on ammo and untouched by anyone else. If one does find a dormant, and it's just lying there, cut its cords to its power source if you can. They need a lot of power to start up or something, or maybe the cords send the on signal. Whatever it is, it takes them out of the game. Wakers and dormants are the same thing, as far as Jack can tell. But wakers are always active, and dormants usually just sit in their charge stations, attached to a bundle of cables. On one occasion, all Jack had to do to knock out a waker was rattle its power supply a bit. Knowing what could be waiting, Jack treads carefully through the ruins, watching for any red dots that could be the infrared of a prox detector. Jack guides his way through the dark ruins with a shard of metal, like a blind man's cane, flinting it off of another piece of metal to create sparks, guiding his way. The cooling metal bulkheads of the ruins, caused by the setting sun and the rapid cooling that it brings, shriek out and echo throughout the ruins. As it gets louder, Jack slows his pace and listens intently for anything moving. All quiet. The ruins are fairly unexplored. The few rooms not blocked off by infilling sand are untouched, but fairly empty. Jack's happy enough to find a few trinkets of unknown function and the occasional dehydrated ration pack. The first one's chow mein with beef, and the second one's battered fish and chips. A few rooms down, Jack hits the jackpot and finds a whole seal container of Lucky Ramen. It's too heavy to carry as he goes further, and Jack dumps it off near the entrance, kicking the metal wedge out to stop any others lucky enough to find the place from running off with his hard-won salvage. When the entrance slams closed, a sift of sand pours down and the last glimmer of the sun disappears. Deeper in the ruins, Jack gains some confidence and strikes his flint repeatedly to light the areas. Between the flashes of sparklight, he stumbles into a room at the far end of a hall flanked by collapsed paths and doors that won't budge. The room has all the telltale signs of prox alarms, faint red lights, and huge metal consoles. Jack weaves into the room carefully, avoiding the direct paths, crawling over consoles, and to the center of the room. He strikes his flint several times to reveal the room, to see several dormants collapsed inside their charge stations. But behind him, he finds one upright, with the glass plate of its forehead flashing a red light. Jack tenses for a moment and listens for it to move. A whirring sound comes from its direction, then quiets. It happens again, and Jack lowers himself below the console. Underneath the console, his searching grasp catches a printed paper with a hole punch lining. He's caught off guard and tears it from the console. The whirring from the direction of the dormant stops, and Jack risks striking his flint again. The dormant hasn't moved. Jack strikes his flint several more times as he glances around the room. He sees nothing worth taking, and rather than investigate closer, he figures it best to just get out now. As he crosses back over the console, his hand places badly and lands on a button. He's greeted with a thunk noise against the ground and hears something rolling. When he sparks his flint, he discovers the button he hit released a printer roll to the floor. It edges forward, and he reaches to stop it, but it crosses an infrared sensor before he can. All the dormant stations flash weakly red and emit a muffled alarm. The one still standing dormant echoes out an unmistakable sound of activation, and Jack takes no second thoughts on dashing out of the room. If this was a waker, Jack would probably just close in and kill it, since they're usually out of ammo. But this is a dormant. As Jack dashes, he watches the light on the corner of its head flicker from red to green. He pauses for a second, hoping that dormant stitched up to a bundle of cables maybe won't start. Maybe he'll be lucky, he thinks. It then produces the mechanical sounds that indicate a shitstorm is on its way. Its shoulder-embedded machine gun begins to whir, and before it even leaves its dock, Jack's far out the door. Its thunderous footsteps whomp down the hallway towards Jack, and it doesn't take a genius to realize the whirring noise is about to get louder. Luckily, Jack turns a corner before the shoulder-embedded machine gun blares bullets into the bulkheads. The bullets ricochet, flickering sparks and noise off the metal, but don't even graze Jack, who's already passed around the corner. As the dormant runs towards him, he counts his seconds, guessing he has maybe 6 or so. From his experience, Jack knows how to make a good mental map of the room he's in, since it saved his ass a few times. He's always been good at this, often telling people that his shit-tastic brain does it automatically, and that he barely even has to think about it. Jack ducks through a couple doors before it even comes to the corner. The dormant sits for some time to weigh the probabilities of where Jack went. They're usually pretty good at guessing. The one advantage scavers have over dormants is in knowing their noises, if they are lucky enough to learn them. When a dormant's quiet, it's scanning and doing the math of where its targets may be. Once it's figured that out, it'll stomp towards its target, unless the person is lucky and it miscalcs. Sure enough, after the quiet comes a storm of stomps through the same doorways Jack just went through. Jack tosses himself over a console in the room, and a hailstorm of bullets tears through it and the wall, shredding the wall and gutting the console that's protecting him. The hailstorm stops, and the doorman stomps further into the room. It's gotten real quiet.